It was 8 p.m. during a weekday, and that time had come. My kids were both still young, and our aim was to have them both tucked away in bed by 9 p.m. My daughter is 18 months older than my son, so he had the privilege of staying up longer. And extracting the PlayStation controller from my son at times could be difficult, but never more so than at bedtime, when his adrenaline was pumping, having just completed the latest level on his latest game. And all I said was one 2-syllable word, and that was it. His world exploded. Who knew that that word, bedtime, would be the trigger for World War III? The chorus of, "It's not fair, it's not fair," filled the air. Why does she, pointing at my daughter, get to stay up late and I don't? There was no reasoning with him, no negotiating, and the request for parley refused. What ensued was the mixture of temper tantrum and stubbornness on his part, and on my part, pulling the plug on the PlayStation, pointing upstairs and reinforcing my command, bed, now. Oh, those wonderful days when the kids were young. But my daughter wasn't the innocent one either. My son loved savoury food. And my daughter, she's totally the opposite. She loves sweet stuff, and she still has a sweet tooth now. Guess which one of those foods is better for you? I can really sympathise with my daughter though. I love a good pudding, lashings of custard, cream and ice cream all at once. And I've really felt sorry for her at times. You see, she only has to look at food and she puts weight on, whereas my son can find it hard to keep weight on no matter what he eats. Anyway, the meal table could easily become an issue. With one kid you needed to encourage to eat, and the other you just needed to discourage. So when my son asked for more pudding, you'd naturally agree and just dish out more. But you know, when my daughter reenacted that scene from Oliver Twist, more please, you'd find your mouth full of, "Are you sure? Aren't you full? How about some fruit?" Which triggered in those immortal words, "It's not fair, Dad, it's not fair." And the tantrums just followed after that. I must admit, it didn't seem fair to me, but it was the right thing to do. You see, it's so hard to act justly, isn't it? I don't know about you, but I really like having a peaceful life. I don't like turmoil. I don't like arguments, and I don't like being upset. But acting justly doesn't necessarily mean a peaceful outcome. And in fact, many times it can mean conflict. In Micah 6:8, the Bible says, "He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." He has shown you what is good. God has shown us what is good for us, the good things to do. And one of those things is to act justly. Now, just let me recap on what we said and discussed a few weeks ago about that statement. We said that acting justly is living with a sense of what is right and what is wrong. It's all about handling the very physical things of this world with fairness. It's all about standing up in this world for equality and for the protection of the vulnerable. It's all about using our resources to fuel justice and not injustice. The trouble is, we act so much of the time like the child, stomping, shouting, finger pointing, stubbornly standing our ground, exclaiming, "It's not fair, it's not fair," instead of being like the adult. And you know, I really think God is asking us at this time to become mature, to develop here. I read in Ezekiel these words, and they come from Ezekiel 18, and they're in verse 29. I read them earlier this week. And it's God who's speaking here, and he says this: I am fair or just. You are the ones who are not fair. Now that's quite a statement, isn't it? If it hasn't stopped you in your tracks, then it should have done. It would seem that our idea of justice and fairness is quite different to God's. And so the question really is whose definition of fairness are we following here? Now, I've worked for several companies and I've seen one strategy deployed throughout them all. Their ability to redefine the English language to suit their own purposes. Oh, how they can change the basic definition of things to latch on to both the employee and the customer values, but focus them on their own needs. It's a bit like those orange juice commercials. You've all seen them, where the family's sitting there at breakfast, smiling, laughing, perfectly dressed, drinking orange juice. And the orange juice producers, or at least the advertisers, latch on to the happy family value, the peaceful, fun-filled life value, which we all know comes from a good night's sleep, fostered relationships and self-sacrifice. And yet they redefine it. They replace all that hard relationship work with one thing: orange juice. So drinking orange juice will give you what you value. Yeah, sure thing. But you know, that's exactly what we've done with justice. We've redefined it to make it simple for us to do rather than follow the true definition, the definition that God uses. So just pause for a second now and think about these questions. You might not be able to answer them straight off, but just think about them. How do I define justice? How does God define justice? And by which definition am I just or not? Let's take Ezekiel 18 verses 5 to 9. Let's just read that here. It says this: Suppose there is a righteous man who does what is just and right. He does not eat at the mountain shrines or look to the idols of Israel. He does not defile his neighbour's wife or have sexual relations with a woman during her period. He does not oppress anyone, but returns what he took in pledge for a loan. He does not commit robbery, but gives his food to the hungry and provides clothing for the naked. He does not lend to them at interest or take profit from them. He withholds his hand from doing wrong and judges fairly between two parties. He follows my decrees and faithfully keeps my laws. That man is righteous. He will surely live, declares the sovereign Lord. There's quite a lot there, isn't there? And we could take it apart line by line, but I just want to highlight the main themes. And this passage gives us quite an accurate definition of what God's definition of acting justly is. First up, it talks about shrines and idols, and it's easy to dismiss those lines, isn't it? To ignore them. After all, I don't go to shrines. I don't worship idols, do I? But God is saying that justice and worship are intimately linked. You're probably sick of me saying this, but worship is two words: worth-ship, meaning that which we assign worth to. So who or what are we worshipping? Who or what are we worshipping when we weigh up justice-based decisions and take action? Do my actions result in honouring Adonai, some other God, myself? When we wade into Afghanistan back in 2001, who as a country were we worshipping? And what about during Brexit? Then there's all that stuff about adultery and women's periods in the passage. And what on earth has that got to do with justice? Well, just think a moment. What was the standing of women in society at that time? When were they most vulnerable? And who has that same type of standing now in society? And when and where are they most vulnerable? And perhaps that's why such graphic words as adultery and periods are used to provoke us. You know, are we taking advantage of those people who are vulnerable now? Those who have no say in things, those who have no power. This part is all about purity, it's all about integrity, and it's how tightly they are both woven into fairness and justice. For example, we can't stand up against slavery if we buy our clothes from a source of slave labour, can we? Equally, we can't stand up against nation building if we manipulate our own family's decisions. The point is, it's all about not doing in private what you're publicly standing up against. And that is a lot harder than it sounds, especially when we have redefined what the terms and the benefits are to us. You know, a lot of the time we don't even realise what we're doing. The final major point in this Ezekiel passage points out to us the real crux or the heart of what justice means to God. And it basically talks about money and how it is handled. Well, more specifically, it talks about the haves and the have-nots. And even more specifically, the attitude about those who have stuff. It's quite easy to point the finger and say, it's only fair that they don't have anything. They didn't do what I did. They didn't work hard like I did. They didn't risk what I risked. And the issue is that when we start believing those kinds of statements, the next step of oppressing them is quite easily taken. Did you know that oppression is defined as unjust exercise of authority? And so we easily assume authority, as we also assume that what we did was better. We jump to the conclusion, because I'm successful, I know better. What a lie that is. This is all about treating people how you would like to be treated. Actually, it's more than that. It's about treating others better than you would be expected to be treated. It's all about being a giver rather than a taker. In fact, that is underlined in the book of Acts, when Paul recalls Jesus saying these words, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." So to act justly is to go beyond what it is to act normally or what is naturally expected. In those terms, it's being supra-normal or supernatural. So can I encourage you today to get your definition of justice right? Can I encourage you to revisit those questions? The questions of, how do I define justice? How does God define justice? And how am I acting justly? Now, you might not feel that we have influence over our government or are able to make changes at such a high level. But we can make changes in our own families and in our own neighbourhoods. In our own businesses, in the transactions that we make, in the decisions that we make. So how can we, in the just decisions we make, show our worship to God? At that basic level, the family, the workplace, the neighbourhood. And let us keep that Micah 6 verse in mind. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.